use this to know if this property is going to cash flow, and it just calculates all the stuff in, shows me how much value or equity I'll have in the property over 30 years, when I should sell it. Really, really cool calculator. I use it early on, and if I'm going to keep it, and then I don't really ever look at it again. But it's very helpful to know, is this a good property to buy for a rental? So I did this one here based on the same deal that we've been looking at through this. So if I go over to the scenario, I went over to that my loan amounts to be 182. And if you remember over here, we bought this for 144, and we said that a rental amount would be 15,000. So you add that together, some holding costs, so on and so forth. 182, what that number is 70% of the ARV of the rental. So C19, that cell there, it's 70% of 260, because that's what I said the ARV would be as a rental. That's how I got that 182 number. Now, if you do your refis at 75% or 65%, you could adjust that number accordingly. I put it at 70% as a very generic, healthy number to do for your cash out refis, your BRRRR method. So I have that there. So there's that 182. So I come over to this rental analysis, and there's a lot of numbers in here that you could adjust. You could leave a bunch of them the same if it's the same for you time and time again. But I go in here and I have the loan amount, right? And I have that loan amount of 182 because we just had it from that other page. You don't really need your ARV on here. It's irrelevant to the cash flow of the property. It does tell you on the previous page, the scenarios, your equity that you have in it. You plug your interest rate in, amortize over 30 years. Monthly rent, I put $2,500 in there. Annual property taxes, I just spitball some numbers. Annual insurance, HOAs. You could say that HOA, throw a $1,200 HOA on there. You can see that it just lowered our cash flow $100 a month. Let's say that there isn't, though, because I hate HOAs. And then up here, your vacancy, maintenance, CapEx, property management fees. We have property management in-house. We have some maintenance guys on staff. So these numbers are lower for me, but they might be higher for you, right? So you might need to have vacancy at 10%. You see that just took away $100 in cash flow. And let's say that the home is newer. Let's say that you just pump each of these up to 8%. All right. And then your property management fees, let's say you actually use a property manager, and that you're probably going to pay them about 8%, maybe 9%, something like that. All right. Annual rent growth, 3%. Annual property value growth, 3%. Very safe numbers to be at. Sure, they might go down next year, but they'll skyrocket up another year. So don't get too hung up on these numbers. They're just for your projections out. And then sales expense, I have that at 6%. That should essentially cover the 5% in the agents, and then 1% in closing fees is what that calculates there. So if I did it at those numbers, which are pretty conservative numbers to use, this property would cash flow $160 a month roughly. And you can see here where those numbers are going. $250 in property taxes, $125 in insurance, mortgage, that's your principal and taxes, your vacancy that you should be setting aside, maintenance, CapEx, property management. So be oh, this is a good property. It cash flows $158 a month. We talked about it as a newer build. I would totally go for it as a rental as well. Now down here is where it's really cool. And you can look at this and go, what's the potential annual gross income? So you can see that grows every year, because what that's doing is that is taking in the annual rent growth, the gross income coming in, that's increasing 3%, and it starts to compound on itself. That's where it gets really, really cool and fun, because on year one, you're making 30 grand gross, but on year 30, you're making $70,000 a year gross, and you probably don't have a mortgage if you didn't do any refis. So your vacancy, you're budgeting that every year, shows you all that stuff. Your operating expenses, your mortgage payment doesn't change. CapEx, your annual cash flow increasing there. One thing that this doesn't, full disclosure, I'm not here to spoof anyone, but this isn't capturing a taxes increase, because taxes do go up every year on a property. So does insurance. So it's not capturing that on here. I was probably totally done with trying to fill this out. But it doesn't capture it. So keep that in mind, that your cash flow might be a little bit lower as it goes down based on what those taxes do. But nonetheless, what's interesting is your equity that you have on this property, and you can look and be like, where is it kind of bottoming out or stalling out? So right away, your percent equity is at 28%. I don't know why my ROI is not calculating in there. That was working earlier. I'll have to look into that. But if you're, oh, you know why? It's because I think it's, no, I'll have to figure it out. I'm not sure why that's not calculating correctly. But your total return on equity and cash flow, you can see it growing all the way down here. You get to year 30. By year 30, you're basically, if you were to sell it, you'd make about $640,000. That's your total return on your equity and your cash flow, at least. No one really looks at a single family as a cap rate, but I have it on there just so you kind of know what it looks like going over the years. I wish this was calculating. I don't know why it's not. Error function, unary minus parameter 1 expects number. Interesting. I don't know why that's pulling and funky. I'll have to work on that. Was working earlier, but that there gives you a breakdown all the way across of where this property's at and how much equity is gained, and your percent equity, your dollar equity, your loan balance. You can see how that's paid down over time. That amortizes that down all the way down to zero. So really cool stuff to use here. Your property value as well. This home in 30 years should be worth $612,000. And if you adjust anything as well, like what's your annual property value growth? Let's say that you are a little more hopeful and it's at a 4%. Well, remember that compounds from day one. So the property value now, instead of that 600, 700, whatever it was, now it's up to an 800 after 30 years. So cool calculator to use. Again, I don't know why the annual ROI is not calculating there. Sorry, I couldn't show you that. I'm not going to reshoot this video, but typically that number does pull in there. I'll find out where that error is and fix it. But this here is the calculator I use to know if something's going to cash flow and what it looks like for us.